My cousin forged Mom's signature to claim the estate. The notary remembered everything. She copied a signature to take a fortune. One careful witness preserved every detail. The first time I saw my mother's forged signature, it was projected 6 feet tall on a courtroom wall. My cousin Marissa sat across the aisle in a cream suit, one hand resting on a leather folder as if she had already won. Behind her were 3 relatives who had spent the previous month telling anyone who would listen that I was delaying probate because I could not accept my mother's final decision. They did not look at me when the clerk enlarged the last page of the trust amendment. They looked at the name at the bottom, Elaine Mercer. The letters were smooth, confident, and almost elegant. My mother had not written that way in 2 years. An aggressive neurological treatment had left her right hand weak. On good days, she printed slowly with her left hand. On bad days, she used a rubber signature stamp for birthday cards, but never for legal or financial documents. The signature on the wall swept upward in one uninterrupted motion. It looked like the signature from her driver's license, copied before illness had changed her muscles. According to Marissa, Mom had signed the amendment 12 days before she died. It removed me as successor trustee, transferred the house, the orchard, and every investment account into Marissa's control, and named Marissa the sole beneficiary. A separate deed, bearing the same signature and notarial seal, placed the orchard inside the amended trust. Marissa's attorney called the documents clear evidence of my mother's intent. My attorney, Daniel Cho, called them exhibits subject to authentication. I called them impossible. The judge did not ask what I called them. She asked why a duly notarized amendment should not be accepted. Daniel rose and explained that we had requested the notary's journal, the original wet ink pages, and the electronic file from which the amendment had been printed. None had been produced. Marissa claimed the originals had been mailed to the county recorder and then lost during a scanning backlog. The recorder had the deed, but it had arrived by courier 3 days after Mom's death. The trust amendment existed only as a high-resolution color copy. Then Daniel put up the hospital medication chart. At the exact time written beside the notarial seal, Mom had been receiving an infusion at St. Catherine's Medical Center. 2 nurses had documented her presence. A security record showed that her patient wristband opened the oncology restroom at 2:17 that afternoon. The amendment claimed she had appeared before a notary 40 miles away at 2:15. Marissa's attorney said the time could be a clerical mistake. Daniel answered that clerical mistakes did not explain why the notary's commission number was missing 1 digit. That was the first moment Marissa stopped smiling. The judge froze the estate. No property could be sold, transferred, mortgaged, or removed. Marissa was ordered to provide an inventory of everything she had taken from the house while acting as supposed trustee. Both sides were given 45 days for limited discovery and witness depositions. Outside the courtroom, my Aunt Celeste caught my arm. She was Marissa's mother and my mother's older sister. For weeks, she had treated grief like a loyalty test. If I questioned Marissa, I was questioning the whole family. She told me to stop punishing everyone because Mom had trusted the person who cared for her. I looked at her hand until she released me. Marissa had visited often during the last 6 months. That was true. She brought groceries, drove Mom to 2 appointments, and posted photographs of homemade soup beside carefully worded captions about family duty. I had done the unphotographed work for 4 years. I managed medication lists, repaired the bathroom after Mom's first fall, sat beside her through 6-hour infusions, and learned which silence meant pain and which meant fear. I never believed care should be counted like points. Marissa did. When Mom died, I was in the room. Marissa was not. The morning after the funeral, Marissa used a key no one knew she had and entered the house before sunrise. By noon, she had changed the alarm code. By evening, she had sent me an email through an attorney informing me that I was not authorized to enter trust property. The email attached the amendment for the first time. I had stared at that signature until the page blurred. Grief made every certainty feel temporarily unreliable. I wondered whether Mom had hidden anger from me. I wondered whether illness had made her dependent on Marissa in ways I had failed to see. I wondered whether the years I remembered had been a story I told myself. Then I noticed the date. On that day, Mom had squeezed my hand during her infusion and complained that the room was too cold. She had asked me to bring her blue cardigan from the car. I still had the parking receipt. There had been no notary. There had been no trip across the county. There had been no secret decision to erase me. In the courthouse parking lot, Daniel waited until my relatives left. Then he handed me a single sheet from the Secretary of State's database. The seal on the amendment belonged to a notary named Helen Park. Her office was less than 2 miles from Marissa's apartment, not 40 miles from the hospital. Helen had renewed her commission the year before, which explained the longer number in the state database. Someone had used an older version of her seal. At the bottom of the page was a note from Daniel's investigator. Helen Park had answered the phone. She remembered Marissa. She remembered my mother. Most importantly, she remembered the document. For the first time since the funeral, the truth felt like something solid enough to hold. To understand how Marissa almost took the estate, I had to stop thinking of her as impulsive. She had not seen an opportunity after Mom died. She had been constructing one while Mom was alive. It began to matter when my grandfather died and left Mom the Mercer orchard. The orchard was 34 acres on the edge of a fast-growing suburb. My grandfather had planted peaches and pears there, but farming was no longer its greatest value. Developers had been buying nearby land for housing. Mom refused every offer. She leased most of the rows to a local grower and kept the old farmhouse as her home. Marissa began calling the land wasted potential. She worked as an office manager at a small real estate law firm. She was not a lawyer, but she understood recordings, title reports, trust summaries, and the language people used when they wanted a document to sound inevitable. She also knew that Mom hated confrontation and grew tired quickly during treatment. At first, her help seemed practical. She organized bills into labeled folders. She created a calendar for appointments. She offered to scan Mom's estate documents so there would be backups. I was grateful. I had reduced my hours at work, but I could not be everywhere, and Marissa presented herself as the missing set of hands. Then she began separating us. She told me Mom needed rest when I called. She told Mom I was exhausted and should not be bothered. She scheduled visits during my work hours, then mentioned them later as proof that she was the dependable one. When I challenged her, she framed it as stress between two worried relatives. I did not want to make Mom's illness into a competition, so I backed away from arguments Marissa was eager to have. After the funeral, those small choices became a narrative. Marissa had been the organized caregiver. I had been the emotional daughter. She had documents. I had memories. The original estate plan was simple. Mom's revocable trust named me as successor trustee and primary beneficiary. The orchard and house would pass to me, while cash gifts would go to Aunt Celeste, Marissa, and 2 charities. Marissa's gift was $75,000. Mom had never excluded her. She had simply refused to give her control. Daniel obtained the drafting attorney's file. It contained notes from 3 meetings over 5 years. In every one, Mom had said the orchard should remain intact for at least 10 years after her death. She wanted the lease income to fund maintenance and medical scholarships at the community college. I could later decide whether to preserve or sell it, but she wanted one period in which no developer could pressure a grieving family. The forged amendment erased all of that. It granted Marissa immediate authority to sell, borrow against, or divide the property. It removed the charitable gifts. It even removed Aunt Celeste. That detail should have bothered my aunt. Instead, Marissa convinced her that she would share the proceeds privately and avoid taxes. Aunt Celeste heard the promise she wanted and defended the document that made the promise legally meaningless. During discovery, Daniel requested Marissa's communications with 3 development companies. Her attorney objected, but the judge allowed messages relating to the orchard. The first email had been sent 7 weeks before Mom died. Marissa described herself as the future controlling trustee and asked whether a buyer could close within 30 days of a death certificate being issued. She attached a parcel map and asked for a confidential estimate. One developer replied that title would require proof of authority. Marissa answered that updated trust papers were being completed. At that time, Mom had not signed anything. A second thread showed Marissa negotiating a consulting fee equal to 2% of the purchase price. The proposed sale price was $4.8 million. Her private fee would have been $96,000, separate from whatever she took as beneficiary. When Daniel showed me the emails, I felt a strange calm. Rage would have been easier. Rage burns through confusion. What I felt was colder. Marissa had sat at Mom's kitchen table and listened to her talk about scholarships. She had watched Mom struggle to lift a coffee cup. She had nodded while Mom described the orchard as the only thing her father had been able to leave behind. Then she had gone home and priced the fastest way to turn all of it into money. The emails also contained a name, Helen Park. One message from Marissa to a developer said that a mobile notary had been arranged for the revised documents. The date of that message was 1 day before the alleged signing. Helen's company appeared in Marissa's phone records twice that week. Daniel's investigator arranged our first meeting with Helen at his office. Before it happened, he warned me that memory alone would not win the case. Courts trusted records, and a notary's recollection could be challenged. We needed the journal entry, appointment logs, or anything contemporaneous. Helen had all of them. She also had something none of us expected. When a notary refuses a suspicious appointment, she normally writes a short explanation in her journal. Helen had written nearly a page. She had done that because the woman at the appointment was not my mother. Helen Park was 62, precise, and smaller than I expected. She arrived carrying a black zippered journal inside a clear evidence sleeve. She did not offer dramatic conclusions. She described procedures. Her mobile notary business handled hospital forms, real estate documents, powers of attorney, and end-of-life planning. She had met Mom once before, 18 months earlier, when Mom signed an advance healthcare directive at our house. I remembered the visit. Helen had asked everyone except Mom to leave the room while she confirmed that the decision was voluntary. She had watched Mom sign slowly with her left hand and recorded the identification details: thumbprint, fee, location, and time. That legitimate journal entry still existed. The signature beside it looked like the woman I knew. Uneven pressure, shortened final letters, and a small break between Elaine and Mercer, where Mom had paused to reposition her hand. The forged amendment showed none of those features. Helen then opened to the entry dated the day before the alleged notarization. The appointment had been booked by Marissa using her own phone number. She requested a home visit to notarize an amended trust and deed for an elderly aunt. Helen quoted the fee and explained that the signer needed current identification, awareness of the documents, and the physical ability to communicate consent. Marissa changed the location twice. First, she gave Mom's address. Then she said the house was being cleaned and moved the appointment to an apartment complex near her own building. Helen arrived at 6:40 in the evening. Marissa met her in the parking lot and said her aunt was tired. Inside the apartment was an older woman wearing a gray scarf, large tinted glasses, and a medical mask. Marissa introduced her as Elaine. Helen had seen Mom before. Even with the scarf and mask, she knew the woman was wrong. The woman was broader through the shoulders. Her eyes were brown, while Mom's were pale green. More importantly, she responded when Marissa called her Aunt Elaine, but she could not state the address of the property being transferred. She looked to Marissa before every answer. Helen asked for identification. Marissa produced Mom's driver's license and kept her thumb pressed over part of the photograph. Helen took the card, compared the face, and ended the appointment. Marissa argued that illness had changed her aunt's appearance. Helen said appearance was only one issue. The signer had not demonstrated knowledge of the transaction and did not match a person Helen had previously notarized. Then Marissa asked whether the paperwork could be acknowledged if it had already been signed. Helen refused. Marissa asked whether another notary would know about the refusal. Helen explained that notarial journals were not a shared database, but backdating or falsely acknowledging a signer was illegal. Marissa wanted to know whether the serial number on a seal changed after renewal. That question was the reason Helen wrote a full page. She recorded the woman's description, the incorrect location, the driver's license number, the titles of the documents, and Marissa's questions. She marked the appointment refused, identity and willingness not established. She also attached the confirmation texts to her monthly invoice file. Daniel asked if Helen knew the woman in the scarf. She did not. But the apartment complex required visitors to enter through a gate. Helen's invoice included a parking charge and a digital trip log. If the complex still had gate video, we might identify her. I asked Helen the question I had been afraid to ask. Had Mom ever told her that she wanted to change the trust? Helen considered her answer before speaking. During the health directive appointment, she had asked Mom whether anyone was pressuring her about financial decisions. Mom said a niece kept bringing her papers about the orchard, but she was not signing property documents without me and her attorney present. Helen had recorded the statement only as a capacity note, not as an accusation. Hearing it hurt more than I expected. Mom had known Marissa was pushing. She had protected me from the worry because she thought she still had control. The refusal appointment occurred the night before the documents were supposedly signed. The next day, someone created a notarial certificate bearing Helen's old seal number and a copied version of her signature. Helen could prove the seal was old because she had destroyed it after renewal in accordance with state rules. Her current seal had a different expiration date and number. Images of the old seal still appeared on 2 public deeds recorded years earlier. Anyone who understood title records could download them. Marissa understood title records. Daniel asked Helen to sign a declaration and preserve the journal. She agreed. He also advised her to notify the Secretary of State and her insurer because her seal had been counterfeited. Helen had already made the report. That mattered. It meant her account had been documented before she knew who I was and before she had any reason to help me. The apartment manager initially refused to release video without a subpoena. Daniel obtained one. The footage was grainy, but it showed Marissa entering with an older woman at 6:12 and leaving with her at 7:03. The woman removed her scarf in the lobby. I did not recognize her. Helen did. The investigator ran the license plate from the gate camera. The car belonged to a woman named Lorraine Voss, the mother of one of Marissa's co-workers. Lorraine was 70, lived 3 towns away, and had recently filed for bankruptcy. When contacted, Lorraine denied knowing Marissa. 2 days later, she hired a criminal defense attorney. By then, Daniel had also received the metadata from the trust amendment. The PDF had been created on a computer registered to Marissa's law firm. The author field contained the initials of an associate attorney who had left the firm 8 months earlier. Someone had used an old template from the office system. Marissa's employer placed her on leave. The next morning, I received an alert from the house security system. Although the court had frozen the estate, the back door had opened at 5:46 a.m. Marissa was inside. The police reached the house before I did. Marissa told them she was checking for a leaking pipe. She still possessed the alarm code because she had changed it after the funeral, and she carried a copy of the disputed trust certificate. The officers did not arrest her at the scene. They documented the visit and told both of us that ownership would be decided by the probate court. I stood on the driveway while she walked past me carrying nothing. She wore exercise clothes and looked mildly inconvenienced, as though I had interrupted a responsible errand. Inside, the office drawers were open. Mom's red document box had been moved from the closet to the desk. The box contained tax returns, insurance policies, old deeds, and correspondence from her estate attorney. Several folders were missing. So was Mom's laptop. The frozen estate order required Marissa to preserve all property. Daniel filed an emergency motion that afternoon. The judge ordered Marissa to return the laptop and every original document within 24 hours. Marissa replied that the laptop had been removed weeks earlier for safekeeping and was with a computer technician. There was no technician. 3 days later, a courier delivered the laptop in a padded envelope. Its hard drive had been replaced. Marissa claimed the old drive had failed. The repair invoice she submitted used the name of a shop that had closed 2 years earlier. Our forensic examiner opened the machine and found fingerprints on the new drive's packaging tab. More useful than fingerprints, however, was Mom's cloud backup. I had set it up after she accidentally deleted a folder of family photographs. Marissa did not know the laptop synchronized documents every night. The backup restored the missing estate folder. It contained copies of the original trust, the orchard lease, and a letter Mom had drafted to her attorney 4 months before her death. The letter described Marissa's repeated requests for trustee powers. Mom wrote that she appreciated the help, but did not want Marissa involved in land decisions. She asked whether the trust could require 2 independent appraisals before any future sale. The letter had never been sent. Mom had saved it under the name Questions for Robert. The backup also showed that someone plugged a flash drive into the laptop 9 days before Mom died and opened files containing scans of her driver's license, prior signature pages, and the original trust. The device identifier matched a flash drive Marissa's employer had issued to office staff. At that point, the case stopped looking like a questionable amendment and started looking like a blueprint. Marissa had access to a genuine signature from before Mom's hand weakened. She had access to old deeds showing Helen's former seal. She had access to legal templates and a printer capable of producing color documents. She had tried to create a live notarization with an impersonator. When Helen refused, Marissa built the page she needed from pieces that already existed. The forensic document examiner found evidence of that construction. Under magnification, the signature contained tiny compression blocks not present in the surrounding text. The same blocks appeared in the scan of Mom's driver's license signature. When the 2 images were scaled and layered, the strokes matched exactly, including a microscopic gap caused by a scratch on the license. No person signs her name in the exact same shape twice. A copied image does. The notarial signature had also been lifted from a deed Helen notarized 6 years earlier. The first upward stroke contained a dot from dust on the county scanner. That dot appeared on the amendment too. Daniel called it a digital fingerprint. The financial records were worse. Using the forged trust certificate, Marissa had opened an estate management account 2 days after Mom died. She transferred $86,000 from Mom's savings and paid $25,000 to a company called Cobalt Advisory. The company's registered agent was Lorraine Voss's son. Lorraine's bankruptcy attorney eventually negotiated limited immunity for her cooperation. Her statement arrived in a sealed transcript. Marissa had offered her $10,000 to pose as a sick relative for a notary appointment. Lorraine claimed she believed the documents concerned a small storage unit and that no signature would be required. She wore the scarf, glasses, and mask because Marissa told her the notary only needed to witness identity confirmation. When Helen refused, Marissa paid her $2,000 in cash and promised the rest later. The $25,000 payment to Cobalt included Lorraine's unpaid balance and money routed back to Marissa. Lorraine's story did not make her innocent, but it made the sequence complete. Meanwhile, Marissa's inventory of the house listed furniture, appliances, and jewelry. It omitted the red document box, the laptop, Mom's coin collection, and a set of antique orchard ledgers. When ordered to amend the list, she said the coins had been gifts and the ledgers had no financial value. I did not care what the ledgers were worth. My grandfather had recorded harvests in them for 40 years. Mom kept them wrapped in linen because the pages smelled faintly of the storage barn where she grew up. Daniel requested their return with the coins. The judge scheduled a compliance hearing and warned that any additional removal could lead to contempt. That finally changed the tone of the family. My uncle called to ask whether Marissa could actually go to jail. Another cousin wanted to know whether the development deal was still possible. Aunt Celeste sent a long email insisting that Marissa had only been trying to carry out what Mom was too sick to complete. No one asked why a loving plan required an impersonator. I realized then that the forgery had depended on more than technology and access. It depended on a family habit. Marissa counted on everyone choosing the most comfortable explanation. She knew they would rename pressure as help, theft as confusion, and evidence as an attack. She had been right about them. She had been wrong about me. The compliance hearing lasted 19 minutes. Marissa returned the coin collection in a plastic grocery bag. 2 coins were missing. She returned the orchard ledgers with water damage along one edge and claimed they had been stored that way. She could not produce the original hard drive or explain the false repair invoice. The judge removed her from any temporary role she might claim, appointed a neutral fiduciary, and ordered a forensic accounting at Marissa's expense if the documents were found invalid. She also referred the missing property issue to the district attorney. Outside the courtroom, Marissa approached me for the first time without her mother or attorney between us. She said I was destroying her life over land I had never worked. I had pruned trees with my grandfather before I was tall enough to reach the upper branches. I had spent summers packing fruit in boxes, while Marissa stayed inside complaining about the heat. But her accusation was not about history, it was about entitlement. She believed the estate belonged to whoever was bold enough to seize it. I told her the land was not the reason we were there. She asked what I wanted. The answer surprised both of us. I wanted the truth entered into a public record where no one could soften it later. For weeks, relatives had told me to settle quietly. Their proposed compromise changed as the evidence grew. First, they suggested dividing the estate equally. Then they suggested giving Marissa the cash and me the orchard. Later, they asked me to guarantee that I would not support criminal charges if she surrendered everything. They called each proposal peace. Peace, in their version, meant I absorbed the cost while Marissa avoided the consequence. Daniel explained that I did not control the criminal investigation. I could settle civil claims, but I could not promise what prosecutors would do with forged documents, theft, or counterfeit notarization. More importantly, any private settlement could let Marissa continue claiming Mom had chosen her. I refused. The refusal made me greedy again. Aunt Celeste posted a vague message online about people who valued property more than blood. She did not mention the impersonator, the copied seal, or the $86,000. Then the first appraisal arrived. The orchard was worth $5.3 million if sold to a developer, more than anyone had realized. Marissa's plan had not been a desperate grab for a modest inheritance. It had been an attempt to control a fortune. The appraisal also revealed a problem with the development offer. The buyer Marissa had contacted expected the county to approve a zoning change. Attached to its internal valuation was a draft access agreement across neighboring conservation land. Mom did not own that access. Marissa had represented that she could obtain it through a relationship with a county planning employee. The employee was Aunt Celeste's boyfriend. He denied promising anything, but his messages showed Marissa asking him how quickly an application could be placed on the consent calendar. He told her not to use his government email. The county opened an ethics review. Marissa's network began collapsing because every person she had recruited believed they were participating in a small shortcut. Once the whole structure became visible, they rushed to separate themselves from it. Her employer provided computer access logs. Marissa had entered the firm's template archive late at night and downloaded a trust amendment prepared for an unrelated client. She replaced names and asset descriptions, but failed to remove a hidden document identifier. The associate, whose initials appeared in the metadata, had no involvement. The firm terminated Marissa and notified its malpractice carrier. The color printer log showed a 42-page job from her account. Only 14 pages were in the amendment and deed. The remaining pages likely included test copies. A search warrant later recovered those copies from a locked file drawer in Marissa's apartment. Some showed Mom's signature too large. Others showed Helen's seal with the wrong background removed. One page contained 3 versions of the notarial block placed side by side. Even Aunt Celeste stopped calling them paperwork mistakes. She changed tactics instead. She said Marissa had suffered from anxiety after losing her job and should not be judged by her worst decision. She asked me to remember the cousin who shared my room during childhood holidays. I did remember. I remembered Marissa helping me hide a broken lamp when we were 10. I remembered us eating peaches on the farmhouse steps. I remembered how fiercely she defended me when older children mocked my braces. Those memories were real. So was the woman who used my mother's illness as cover. Accepting one truth did not require erasing the other. 2 weeks before the evidentiary hearing, her attorney proposed a formal settlement. Marissa would withdraw the amendment, return the remaining funds, and waive her $75,000 gift. In exchange, I would release civil claims, support probation, and agree that the documents had been created during a misunderstanding about Mom's wishes. The last phrase was the center of the offer. She did not only want freedom, she wanted ambiguity. I rejected it. Daniel warned me that hearings carried risk. Judges could exclude evidence, witnesses could become uncertain, appeals could last years. The estate would pay legal fees until the court decided who caused them. I understood. But Mom had spent her final months being quietly pressured in her own home. If I accepted a lie dressed as misunderstanding, I would preserve the exact protection Marissa had counted on. So we prepared for court. Our witness list included the nurses, the document examiner, the computer forensic specialist, Lorraine Voss, the drafting attorney, and Helen Park. Marissa's witness list included Aunt Celeste and a handwriting consultant who said illness could cause signatures to vary. The consultant withdrew after receiving the layered images from Mom's driver's license. That left Marissa with her mother. I had the woman who remembered everything. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a copy of Helen's journal entry and tried to imagine Mom's last weeks from outside my own grief. She had known Marissa wanted control. She had mentioned it to Helen and drafted questions for her attorney. Yet she had kept accepting Marissa's grocery bags and rides. At first, that felt contradictory. Then I understood. Mom was dying. She did not have the energy to turn every suspicion into a confrontation. She believed her existing documents, her attorney, and the recording system would outlast pressure. She thought saying no was enough. It should have been. Helen's journal was not dramatic. That was its power. The ink changed slightly where her pen had paused. The appointment details appeared between entries for a loan signing and a school travel consent. Nothing had been rewritten for our case. At 6:31 p.m., Helen recorded arrival at the gate. At 6:46, she noted that the presented signer did not resemble the identification or prior client. At 6:51, she wrote that the signer could not state the property address or explain the document. At 6:55, she recorded Marissa's question about seal numbers after renewal. At 6:58, she terminated the appointment. The trip software supported every time. The gate camera supported the location. The texts supported the booking. The state report proved Helen had complained about misuse of her seal before she learned of the probate fight. Daniel expected Marissa's attorney to argue that Helen was mistaken because she handled hundreds of appointments. Helen prepared by reviewing only records she had created at the time. She refused to guess about anything not documented. That restraint made her more credible. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom gallery was nearly full. News of the orchard's value and the counterfeit seal had traveled through our family and into the local legal community. Notaries understood that a forged seal threatened more than one estate. It threatened the trust placed in every acknowledgement they performed. Marissa arrived in navy blue, with no visible jewelry and no cream suit confidence. Aunt Celeste sat behind her. For 1 second, my aunt looked at me as if she might speak. Then she lowered her eyes. The judge began with the chain of custody for the documents. The county recorder testified that the deed had arrived after Mom's death in an envelope bearing Marissa's return address. There was no wet ink original in the file because the county accepted electronic submissions through approved agents. The submitting account belonged to Marissa's employer, used without authorization. Mom's oncology nurse testified next. Her records placed Mom in the infusion chair before, during, and after the supposed notarization. The medication administered that afternoon could cause fatigue, but the nurse said Mom remained oriented. She did not leave the department. The document examiner demonstrated how the signature aligned perfectly with the driver's license scan. He explained image compression and the repeated scratch. He overlaid Helen's authentic signature from the old deed with the one on the amendment. The dust mark appeared in both. The courtroom became very quiet. Marissa's attorney tried to suggest that legitimate signatures could have been scanned for convenience after the signing. The examiner agreed that electronic signatures could be lawful in some circumstances. Then he pointed out that the amendment stated it had been signed physically in Helen's presence. Convenience did not explain a false acknowledgement. Lorraine testified under limited immunity. She admitted wearing the disguise and accepting money. Her voice shook, but the gate video made denial impossible. She described Marissa rehearsing answers in the car and telling her to let Marissa speak if questions became confusing. On cross-examination, Lorraine admitted she never saw Marissa assemble the final documents. That was the narrow point Marissa's attorney wanted. Then Helen took the stand. She brought the original journal. The clerk placed it beneath a document camera, and the page appeared on the same wall where I had first seen Mom's forged signature. Helen identified her handwriting and explained her routine. She described meeting Mom 18 months earlier. She remembered Mom because most clients signed health directives with their dominant hand, while Mom carefully used her left. She also remembered Mom asking whether a notary could stop a relative from bringing documents she did not want. The judge allowed the statement for limited purposes relating to Helen's identification and process, not as proof of inheritance intent. Helen did not stretch it further. She described the appointment with the woman in the scarf. She identified Lorraine. She explained why she refused and why Marissa's questions concerned her. Then Daniel showed her the seal on the amendment. Helen said it was not her current seal and had never been applied by her. He showed her the signature. She said it was an image taken from an older public document. He asked whether Elaine Mercer appeared before her on the date listed. Helen answered no. He asked whether anyone appeared before her at the time listed. Again, no. Finally, he asked whether she had notarized the amendment or deed at any time. No. Marissa's attorney stood for cross-examination. He suggested Helen had a financial reason to deny a mistake because admitting an improper notarization could damage her business. Helen agreed that improper notarization would damage her. Then she explained that falsely denying a real journal entry would also expose her to criminal penalties, loss of commission, and civil liability. He asked why she had not called police immediately after the refused appointment. Helen said suspicious questions were not a completed crime. She documented the refusal, preserved the messages, and later reported the counterfeit seal as soon as she saw it. He asked whether Mom could have signed the documents elsewhere. Helen said Mom could have signed anything anywhere, but she had not acknowledged those signatures before Helen. Therefore, the certificate was false. There was nothing left to soften. During a recess, Marissa's attorney requested a private conference. 20 minutes later, he told the judge that his client wished to invoke her right not to testify because of the pending criminal investigation. In a civil hearing, the judge was permitted to consider that choice alongside the evidence. Marissa did not take the stand. For months, she had spoken for my mother. When the moment came to speak for herself, she remained silent. The judge issued her ruling from the bench, then followed it with a written order 2 days later. She found that the trust amendment and deed were fraudulent, that Mom's signature had been copied without authorization, and that Helen's seal and signature had been counterfeited. She ruled that Marissa had acted in bad faith before and after Mom's death. The original trust controlled the estate. The courtroom did not erupt. Real consequences rarely arrive with the noise people imagine. They arrive as numbered paragraphs read in a steady voice. The forged deed was void. Marissa had no authority as trustee. Every transfer she initiated was reversed. The $86,000 plus interest had to be restored. Marissa was surcharged for forensic accounting, document examination, property damage, missing coins, and a substantial portion of the estate's legal fees. Her $75,000 gift under the original trust was revoked under the trust's no contest and wrongdoing provisions. The judge noted that even without that clause, the surcharge exceeded the gift. The neutral fiduciary would remain until the estate accounts were complete. After that, I would become trustee as Mom intended. The judge also sent the order, exhibits, and transcript to the district attorney, the state notary division, and the professional regulator overseeing Marissa's former law firm. She made no recommendation about criminal punishment. She did not need to. As the clerk collected the exhibits, Aunt Celeste began crying. Marissa stared at the table. I felt no triumph. I felt the release of a pressure I had carried so long that its absence was almost painful. Outside, reporters waited near the courthouse steps because the orchard dispute had become public. Daniel advised me to say little. I told them the court had protected my mother's actual estate plan and that the notary's careful records had made the truth possible. I did not mention Marissa by name. She had placed her own name on enough documents. Criminal charges came 6 weeks later: forgery, attempted theft by deception, identity fraud, unlawful use of a notarial seal, computer offenses, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Lorraine received probation under her cooperation agreement. Aunt Celeste's boyfriend resigned from his county position before the ethics investigation concluded. Marissa eventually pleaded guilty to several counts in exchange for dismissal of others. The court imposed 18 months in custody, followed by supervised release and restitution. Her sentence was shorter than some relatives wanted, and longer than Aunt Celeste believed she deserved. It was not my sentence to design. The public record mattered more to me than the number of months. The plea stated that Mom had not signed the amendment. It stated that Marissa had copied the signature and counterfeited the notarial certificate. It stated that the purpose was to obtain control of estate assets. There was no misunderstanding left. Aunt Celeste did not speak to me for nearly a year. Before sentencing, she sent one final email asking me to write that Marissa had cared for Mom and acted under emotional strain. I replied with a short statement that was both fair and complete. Marissa had provided some meals and transportation during Mom's illness. She had also pressured Mom, arranged an impersonation, forged documents, removed property, and transferred money after death. I would not use one truth to erase another. Aunt Celeste never responded. The neutral fiduciary recovered most of the money. Some had been spent on legal fees and could not be returned immediately, so a lien was placed on Marissa's condominium. The missing coins appeared anonymously in a padded package with no return address. The orchard ledgers went to a conservation lab, where the water-damaged pages were cleaned and stabilized. When I held them again, I found my grandfather's handwriting beneath the faint stains. Each season had a number, a weather note, and a sentence about what the trees had needed. The records were practical, but together they formed a life. The orchard itself had suffered from months of neglect. Irrigation lines were clogged, 2 fences were down, and the leaseholder had delayed pruning because no one knew who could authorize the work. I used trust funds approved by the fiduciary to repair the system and renew the lease. On the first morning I returned as lawful trustee, I walked the eastern rows before sunrise. The trees were bare, their branches dark against a pale sky. Nothing about them looked valuable in the way an appraisal described value. That was the point Marissa never understood. The land was worth millions because someone could destroy it and build something dense on top. To Mom, it was worth protecting because generations had already placed their labor there. I was not required to keep it forever. Mom had not tried to control the rest of my life. She had asked for 10 years of patience, 2 independent appraisals, and a chance for the scholarship plan to work. I could give her that. The first scholarship was awarded the following spring to a nursing student named Ava, whose mother was receiving cancer treatment. The lease income covered tuition, books, and transportation. At the small ceremony, I said the fund honored Elaine Mercer, a woman who believed practical help should be quiet and reliable. Helen attended. I gave her a framed photograph of Mom standing beneath the pear trees before illness. Helen looked at it for a long moment and said, that was the woman she remembered. So did I. Probate closed 14 months after the first hearing. The final accounting listed land, accounts, furniture, recovered property, legal costs, restitution, and charitable gifts. It reduced a family life to columns and totals because that is what courts must do. Yet the most important thing Mom left me never appeared on a balance sheet. She left proof that a quiet no still matters, even when someone louder tries to rewrite it. For a while, I blamed myself for not recognizing Marissa's plan earlier. I replayed every moment when she redirected a call or offered to scan a document. I wondered whether I had protected Mom less by refusing to compete. Daniel told me fraud is designed to make ordinary trust look foolish afterward. That did not mean trust had been wrong. It meant Marissa had chosen to exploit it. I began therapy after the case ended, not because my relatives had broken me, but because surviving a long deception changes how the body understands safety. A phone notification could make my heart race. A family invitation felt like a hidden negotiation. I had learned to organize evidence so carefully that I struggled to accept kindness with no receipt attached. Healing required a different discipline. I learned that boundaries did not need courtroom exhibits. I could decline contact without proving a crime. I could miss the cousin Marissa had once been without inviting the person she became back into my life. Some relatives apologized. My uncle admitted he had defended Marissa because accepting the forgery would mean admitting he had helped isolate me. Another cousin confessed that Marissa promised him work on the development project. Their honesty came late, but I accepted what was sincere. I did not rebuild every relationship. Family reconciliation is often described as the natural ending after a crisis. Sometimes the healthier ending is accurate distance. Aunt Celeste eventually wrote again. Her message contained no accusation. She said she had spent the year reading the transcripts and could no longer pretend Marissa had been confused. She apologized for calling me greedy and for helping turn Mom's death into a contest. I believed she was sorry. I also knew sorrow did not automatically restore access. We met once at a cafe. She looked older and spoke carefully. She asked about the orchard and the scholarship. I told her they were doing well. She said Marissa was taking classes in custody and wanted to write to me. I said I was not ready. That was enough. Aunt Celeste nodded. For the first time in the entire case, she accepted an answer without trying to rename it. The 10th anniversary of Mom's trust plan is still years away. I do not know what I will decide when the restriction ends. The town continues to grow. Taxes rise. Developers send polished letters with aerial photographs and numbers large enough to change several lives. I read every offer. Being faithful to Mom does not require pretending choices are simple. Then I file the letters and walk the rows. The scholarship fund now supports 4 students each year. The grower added a small farm stand near the road, with a portion of sales going to the fund. Children from a nearby elementary school visit during pear season. They learn that fruit does not begin in a supermarket and that old trees can remain productive when cared for properly. Helen still works as a notary. After our case, she began teaching a seminar on refusing suspicious signings and documenting attempted fraud. She uses an anonymized version of the scarf appointment. She tells new notaries that memory is helpful, but records protect memory from becoming an argument. Her journal had seemed ordinary when she opened it in Daniel's office. A black cover, ruled pages, times, identification numbers, fees, thumbprints, and short notes. Yet that ordinary discipline stopped a $5.3 million theft. Marissa had assumed no one would remember a failed appointment. She thought only completed paperwork mattered. She did not understand that Helen treated every refusal as part of her duty. That was Marissa's final miscalculation. She believed important evidence would look important from the beginning. She searched for wills, deeds, passwords, and signature pages. She stole the documents that appeared powerful. She overlooked a parking charge, a gate entry, a printer identifier, a cloud backup, and one handwritten page between 2 routine appointments. The truth survived in the things she considered too small to fear. On the 2nd anniversary of Mom's death, I brought one of the restored orchard ledgers to her grave. I did not leave it there. Mom would have considered that wasteful. I sat on the grass and read several entries aloud. My grandfather had written about a late frost, a broken irrigation valve, and a harvest saved by 3 days of unexpected rain. Beneath one entry, Mom had added a note in her own teenage handwriting. The letters leaned forward and crowded each other. They looked nothing like the signature Marissa placed on the amendment. I traced the sentence with one finger. Mom had written that the trees looked dead in winter only to people who did not know what to watch for. For months after the funeral, Marissa tried to make me believe that my relationship with Mom had been an illusion and that a polished signature mattered more than years of choices. The forgery hurt because it was designed to turn love into doubt. The court restored the estate. Helen's testimony restored the facts. Time restored something more private. I no longer needed every relative to agree that Mom loved me. I did not need Marissa to confess beyond the words required by her plea. I did not need the orchard to remain unchanged forever in order to prove I was a good daughter. I needed only to act with the care Marissa had imitated and the patience Mom had practiced. Before I left the cemetery, I returned the ledger to its protective case. The evening sun fell across the page, catching the uneven strokes of Mom's old note. Real handwriting changes. It hesitates. It reflects age, pressure, illness, and time. It belongs to a moving hand and a living person. The signature Marissa created was flawless because it had never been written at all. That perfection exposed her, and the woman she thought would be a forgettable witness remembered every imperfect detail.